A long time ago, a plane left the ground and vanished completely until just recently. Hidden deep in the forest, covered by plants and darkness, a decaying airplane was found by accident. But what they discovered inside wasn't just old seats or rusty parts. It was something so scary that everyone who looked at it started screaming. What had the forest been keeping secret all these years? What was so awful that even experienced people who solve mysteries couldn't believe their eyes? This isn't just another story about a plane crash. It's a tale with a shocking twist you'll never see coming. It all started with what should have been an ordinary flight, a usual trip with nice weather, good pilots, and passengers full of hope and plans. The middle-sized airplane was carrying families, workers, and crew, each with their own life stories, not knowing what awful destiny was ahead of them. The plane left the ground smoothly from its home airport, with everything going perfectly. But somewhere over a faraway stretch of thick forest, the airplane vanished entirely. There were no danger signals, no cries for help, just total quiet on the radio. One moment it was there, the next moment it was gone. Panic quickly took over the people watching air traffic as they tried desperately to reach the plane. Hours turned into days as rescue teams looked through possible crash sites. Flying machines searched over miles of thick treetops. Boats looked through nearby rivers, and groups on land pushed through hard ground. Despite all their effort, no pieces were found. It looked like the plane had simply disappeared into thin air. Families kept hoping, clinging to the possibility that someone might have lived, but as weeks turned into months and months turned into years, the search was finally given up. The plane was officially called missing, and everyone on it was thought to be dead. The mystery faded into the shadows of unsolved cases, leaving behind questions with no answers and hearts full of grief. That's how things stayed until many years later, when something buried deep in the forest was discovered that would change everything. For many years, what happened to the lost plane had remained one of aviation's greatest puzzles. People who investigate had long since closed the file. Families had mourned their loved ones, and the world had continued on. But deep in the heart of an unknown forest, time had been guarding its secrets. A team of explorers, driven by wonder and the thrill of adventure, began a mission to map the untouched parts of a massive, unexplored jungle. The place was known for its giant trees, twisting rivers, and an eerie silence that stretched for miles. It was a spot that humans hardly ever visited, a land that time had left behind. The group was headed by General Pedro Sanchez, an experienced forest explorer who loved finding the unknown. With him were a scientist who studies life, a person who records movies, and a team of expert wilderness survivors, each prepared for the dangers that lurked in the dense wild. Carrying cutting tools, bags full of gear, and modern cameras to capture their journey, they started what was meant to be a 3-week trip through the jungle. The air was thick with wetness. The noise of insects filled their ears, and every step felt like going deeper into nature's untouched realm. But as they traveled further, odd things began to happen. The forest, alive with activity and motion, felt strangely silent at times. Shadows shifted weirdly between the tall trees, and with each step the explorers felt a growing sense of unease, like they were being watched. Then came the first clue that something was not right. A strange metal thing, partly buried under thick vines and piles of old leaves, grabbed their attention. Wiping away dirt and twisted roots, they revealed a rusty, mysterious piece of wreckage. At first, they thought it might be leftovers from an old army vehicle or a forgotten research base. But as they looked around the area, more pieces showed up. Bent metal, shattered glass, and even the clear remains of airplane seats. Their hearts pounded as they stared at each other. Could it be? Had they found the wreckage of a lost plane? General Pedro Sanchez took a deep breath, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "We need to keep going," he said quietly. With fresh urgency, the team pushed ahead, following the path of debris deeper into the forest. After hours of fighting through thick plants, they finally saw it. Partly covered under a ceiling of tall trees and consumed by time, the wreckage of a plane lay before them. The main part was almost completely intact, though covered in green moss and twisted vines. The front was smashed, showing a brutal crash, while the wings had been torn off, probably by the power of the impact. A total silence fell over the group. For many years, people had wondered where this aircraft had disappeared to. Search teams had looked through thousands of miles trying to find clues, and yet here it was, hidden in plain sight, forgotten by the world. The explorers paused, looking at each other with doubt. What if there were dead people inside? The thought made them shake. General Pedro Sanchez walked carefully forward, reaching out to touch the cold, damaged metal of the aircraft's door. The forest had tried to claim it back, but the frame still stood, weathered but strangely well kept. That's when they noticed something even more frightening. The door wasn't fully shut. It hung slightly open, as if someone or something had left it that way. A crawling feeling of dread settled over the group. Who or what was inside? "Something about this feels wrong," whispered the scientist, her voice shaking. The plane stood like a spirit frozen in time, its broken body telling a story long buried under layers of vines, moss, and rot. The thick forest had tried to eat it completely, but the wreckage refused to vanish. As the explorers walked around it, they noticed disturbing details. The crash had crushed the front like paper. One wing lay broken off several yards away, and the tail was twisted unnaturally, half buried under dirt and leaves. But what stood out most was that door, still slightly open. With his heart racing, General Pedro Sanchez reached for the handle. Taking a deep breath, he pulled it open. The door made a groaning sound on its rusty hinges, echoing scarily through the quiet forest. A musty, stale air escaped, a mix of rotted metal, decayed fabric, and something else, something impossible to name. Flashlights revealed the dark interior, rows of seats bolted to the floor, their fabric rotting and covered with mold. Overhead, storage bins hanging open with scattered belongings. A child's teddy bear, faded and missing an eye, resting against a seat. A pair of sunglasses sitting on a cracked tray table. Scattered passports. And a water-stained journal with handwriting that stopped in the middle of a sentence. Each item was a haunting reminder of lives that were cut short without warning. As the team moved deeper into the cabin, they found more evidence. Torn pieces of clothing, rusty jewelry gleaming in the light beams, and even an old watch, amazingly still ticking, wedged between seats. Then came the most terrifying discovery. Near the emergency exit, a small pile of personal items had been carefully arranged, as if someone had survived the crash and lived there for some time. There were food cans, expired long ago but opened, with handmade tools, a rough blanket made from torn clothing, a rusty knife with a blade stained by something they couldn't identify. But there was no sign of any bodies. That's when the disturbing thought struck them. Had someone survived the crash and then vanished into the forest? Or worse, were they still here? The tension was unbearable. Nervous glances were exchanged as flashlights swept toward the shadows beyond the wreckage. They weren't just uncovering history, they were walking into it. "This doesn't feel right," whispered one of the team members, looking around nervously. "Something's been living here." "We should leave," another team member said, backing away from the wreckage. "This place gives me the creeps." Back at their temporary camp, the team laid out the recovered items, personal belongings, pieces of documents, and most terrifying of all, a half-burned flight logbook found near the cockpit. The pages were damp and delicate, but some entries could still be read. The pilot's shaky handwriting showed a growing sense of fear. Weather getting worse, turbulence increasing, instruments acting strange. Can't trust the readings anymore. Then another entry. Something's wrong. Not just a storm. Passengers are panicking. Lights flickering. Engine noises different. I don't know how to explain it. "My God, General," Pedro Sanchez muttered as he read the entries aloud. "What happened up there?" These words sent chills down their spines. It wasn't just a mechanical problem. Something else had happened. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. General Pedro Sanchez and his crew studied the airplane's planned route compared to where they found the wreckage. Nothing added up. The plane was hundreds of miles away from where it should have been, lost deep in uncharted jungle. Nowhere near where any distress calls had been picked up. Ideas started forming. Maybe the pilot got lost. Maybe they tried desperately to land after something went wrong. Or maybe something worse happened. In the wreckage was a small leather diary that belonged to a passenger named Julian Kupke. What she wrote was terrifying. "The shaking won't stop. Everyone is screaming. It feels like we're dropping, but the pilot keeps saying everything's okay. I don't trust him. There's something outside my window, but that's impossible. All I see is black." Her last words, written with a shaking hand, said, "We've either landed or crashed. I have no idea where we are. Some people are hurt. Nobody's coming to help us. It's been days now. There's something hiding in the trees." The team went completely quiet. The thought that someone or something had been near the crash was deeply scary. They weren't just looking at old objects. They were holding on to the final pieces of real people's lives, their terror, their last words, their fight to stay alive. "Listen," General Pedro Sanchez told his team that night. "We have to be really careful about our next move. This is much bigger than we realized." As they put the pieces together, the puzzle started revealing itself in ways nobody saw coming. The wreckage wasn't just some forgotten leftover. It was a quiet witness to something much more frightening than just a plane crash. While looking through the main part of the plane, General Pedro Sanchez saw weird symbols carved into the inside walls. Marks that didn't look like any airline markings or emergency codes. They looked like they were carved quickly, deep and rough, almost panicked. Deeper inside, the team discovered what looked like a temporary home made from airplane parts. There were clear signs that survivors had tried to live there. Empty water bottles, ripped blankets, food wrapper scraps. But something felt wrong. The shelter had been left behind quickly. Half-finished meals sat there untouched, like people had run away suddenly or been forced to leave. Then came the most terrifying find. A ripped journal buried under debris. It belonged to First Officer Manuel Ranoc. His writing got more desperate each day. Day 3. We've made a camp. Some people are hurt, but we still have hope. Still no rescue teams. Day 7. Weird sounds at night. Voices whispering, but nobody's there. Day 12. People are vanishing. First Leslie, then Herman. No blood, no fighting. They just disappeared. Day 18. I saw it. It's watching us from the trees. It's not a person. The last entry was almost impossible to read, covered with dirt and what looked like old blood. It ended with a scary warning. If someone finds this, don't stay when it gets dark. The team looked at each other with worried faces. This wasn't just investigating a crash anymore. They had found something much darker. Maybe it was dangerous animals, or maybe people trapped alone started seeing things that weren't there. General Pedro Sanchez couldn't stop feeling like something was watching them. The jungle around them suddenly felt crushing, the trees closing in like silent guards. One of the explorers, Alfonso Saraiva, whispered, "What if whatever's out there is still around?" His words felt heavy in the air. "We should get out of here when the sun comes up," Alfonso said, his voice trembling. "This place, it's not safe." After finding these haunting clues, the team had a tough decision. Keep the story secret or tell the world, no matter how disturbing it was. What they'd discovered, the mysterious diary pages, the creepy signs of people disappearing, and the constant feeling of being watched, was too important to ignore. That night, sitting around a weak campfire while the jungle buzzed with nighttime sounds, General Pedro Sanchez spoke to his team. "We can't keep this to ourselves. There are families who need to know the truth, even if it's not what they want to hear." "But what if we're putting ourselves in danger?" asked another team member nervously. "We have a duty," General Pedro Sanchez said firmly. "These people deserve answers." Reluctantly, they all agreed. They recorded everything: pictures, videos, notes, being careful not to make the horror seem sensational. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a story that had to be told. When they got back to civilization, the team gave their findings to the authorities. News about finding the lost plane spread incredibly fast. Big news stations covered the story with headlines like "Mysterious Plane Wreckage Found After Decades in Jungle," scary journal shows, "Terrifying Final Days of Missing Flight," "Unsolved Jungle Mystery," "What Happened to Flight 319?" The media attention was overwhelming. Reporters guessed wildly, with theories blaming wild animals or supernatural forces. But for General Pedro Sanchez and his team, it wasn't about being famous or making headlines. It was about the real human lives behind the mystery. Officials worked to identify remains and personal belongings found at the site. For families of the missing passengers, phone calls reopened old pain and brought long-forgotten names back into heartbreaking focus. Maria Fatima Valencia, whose brother was on the plane, said through tears at a news conference, "For years, we lived not knowing, wondering if he suffered, if he was afraid. Now we know. It hurts, but at least we finally know." The discovery brought painful answers, truth mixed with sadness. The found journal was given back to First Officer Manuel Ranoque's family. His sister held it tight, whispering, "He was brave." The story disappeared from headlines but left a lasting mark. It wasn't just about a lost plane. It was about lives that were lived and connections that were broken. Flight 319's tragedy wasn't meaningless. Lessons learned made aviation safer around the world. As aviation expert Werner Herzog said, "This isn't just a story of loss, it's a story of learning." A memorial was built at the crash site, a simple marker with the names of passengers and crew. For families, it became a holy place for memories they thought were lost forever. This haunting story reminds us how delicate life is, how quickly familiar things can vanish, and how the past can come back when we least expect it. From Flight 319's disappearance to finding it again in the jungle, every piece shows us something deep about human strength, the search for truth, and the burden of finally knowing. Did you like this story? Would you tell a hard truth to help families get answers? Tell us what you think in the comments. Like the story? Subscribe and hit like. Sometimes the truth matters more than feeling good. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Have a great day.